I don't love winter, I don't love snow, I do love to read, and we're gonna talk about a whole bunch of books where snow plays a factor. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. We just got our first snow in New York and it got me thinking about all sorts of books that are set in winter, snowy atmospheres. And if you are looking for something to read this winter that is going to give you all those feels, not like you need a reminder because it's like no degrees outside, but if you do, a little bit for everybody, I hope, and let's just dive right in. So one of my most favorite books that I always recommend is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And this takes place up in Vermont. It is a small college in New England, and it's about a group of friends and kind of an outsider who gets welcomed into their inner circle. And one of them winds up getting murdered one night in the woods. And you find that out on page 1 or 2. You find out who dies, and then we go backwards in time and find out what led up to that murder. So I always equate this as like How to Get Away with Murder, and I just love it. And I read this back in college, not for college, but I was in college when I read it. And it's set in the 90s. Again, it's like this small elite school, and the circle of friends are definitely this ultra privileged, elite, snotty, unlikable group of characters. I fell in love with this book when I first read it, and I can't even pinpoint exactly what it is. I love her writing. I love the story. This is very slow burn. It's like a 500-page book. This is not fast-paced thriller, but to me it's one of those books that I feel like everybody should read, but it definitely has some mixed bag reviews on it. And again, you get so many great descriptive scenes of that cold Arctic Vermont winter, and there's definitely some psychological twisted stuff going on with this group of friends, but I love it. So another book that was a fast favorite of mine is The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley, and I loved this book. And this is another one where snow 100% plays a factor. It is a thriller, and you have a group of friends who are at this hunting lodge, and the huge storm comes in, and they wind up getting stuck there and cut off. I have no communication, and somebody dies. So this was Lucy Foley's first thriller, not her first book, but her first thriller, and the first book of hers that I read. And I fell in love with it, and I love the characters, and they are just such despicable, unlikable people, and I love it. So they are a group of friends from university, and every year for New Year's, they go away for the weekend and kind of have like a reunionish kind of get together. And over the years, there's all just sorts of secrets and lies and deception and grudges and jealousy and just all the things between them. And it all comes to a head this weekend. So we know out of the gate that somebody is dead. We don't know who, we don't know what. And then we go kind of forwards and backwards in time, and we get multiple perspectives. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I will say, in some of the reviews I had heard that people who didn't like it, the unlikable characters just didn't sit with them. But I just felt like Lucy Foley just went for it. She made these people just terrible sometimes and say and do terrible things. And one of the things that I loved was that as I was reading it, and again, you don't know who's dead out of the gate, you just know somebody is you could completely picture any one of them being murdered and any one of them doing the murdering because they were all just that awful, but in the best possible way. So I highly recommend it. I loved this so much more than The Guest List, which I thought was a good book, but I just thought this one was just like out of the ballpark. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Say it 100 times. Loved it. Now, snow always brings upon kind of that isolated mystery feel, so there's going to be a couple of those on this list where snow 100% plays a factor. And one of them is An Unwanted Guest by Sherry LaPena. And this takes place in the Catskills, and they wind up getting snowed in, and at least one person dies. So I don't know if it's totally And Then There Were None vibes, or if it's just the snow in Three Blind Mice, which I'll talk about in a minute vibes. But I'm a fan of Sherry LaPena. I read The Couple Next Door, and then I read her book that came out last year, Someone We Know. I am trash for an isolated thriller, so I am excited to read this one. So Agatha Christie, if you are looking for classic, cannot go wrong mysteries, most famously Murder on the Orient Express. I feel like everybody probably knows this story, but if you don't, it is a Poirot mystery. He is on the Orient Express with a whole bunch of strangers. An avalanche hits, their train gets stuck on the tracks, and one of the passengers winds up dying / getting murdered. Not just dying, 100% getting murdered. And Poirot has to solve the mystery as he does, and it's great. It is classic Christie for a reason. It is great fun. I know I am not holding a copy of it because I don't have it anymore. I used to have one of those annoying pocket paperback mass market books, which I've gotten rid of, and I need to buy it again. But it's such a great mystery, and if you've already read that one, then Three Blind Mice, like I mentioned before, is another isolated. It's at an inn. Snow is a factor. You have a bunch of strangers that are stuck at this inn, and somebody winds up getting murdered, and they need to figure out what happened. So that's another one. Again, classic Christie. That's not a Poirot or Marple. That's just a standalone. So Orient Express if you haven't done it, because to me that's a must read. And if you have, Three Blind Mice is another alternative. On my iPad, I have No Exit by Taylor Adams. And this is another book that I had all the good intentions of reading and I didn't. And I don't know about you guys, I forget about the books that I have on my iPad sometimes. I'm not a huge ebook purchaser. I tend to do ebooks from the library on my iPad, but I did buy No Exit a while ago. And this is a girl who is driving home. I don't even know if it's like Christmas time or what it is, but driving home to see her mom who is sick. And she winds up getting caught in some sort of blizzard situation and has to pull over and is kind of stuck at like a roadside, I think, restaurant or something like that. And there's a bunch of strangers who are there. And when our main character goes out to her car to get something, she sees in the back of one of the other cars in the parking lot that there's a cage with a kid in it. So somebody in that rest stop has a kid in a cage in their car. And from everything I've heard, obviously a bit messed up, but like fast-paced, twisty, all the things are happening in this book, and I need to just right the wrong and read it. If you guys have been following me for a while, then this next book will come as no surprise as a recommendation, and it's Beartown by Frederick Bachman. And this is everything I didn't know I needed in a book, and a book I 100% would not have picked up had it not been for BookTube, because it just wasn't on my radar, and my life has been forever changed by reading Frederick Bachman. And on the off chance, or the very good chance that you've read this, the sequel, I always want to say Us Against Them. Us Against You is also brilliant and a must read. So these take place in the fictional town of Beartown. These are translated from Swedish, and this focuses around an ice hockey team. And when you talk about cold atmosphere, you can feel the cold when you're reading it. You can feel the ice. You can hear the puck hitting the ice. You can hear the crack of the hockey sticks, all of it. I would be hard-pressed to think of another book that I was so moved by the physical writing just a few pages in. He is an absolutely gifted writer, an absolutely gifted storyteller. Now, if you're not a hockey fan, don't worry about it. You don't need to be. Hockey plays a huge part in this, but I am not a huge sports fanatic, but I love these books. And these books are about character. These are about the town. These are about the people. You will be, I think, on an emotional roller coaster of heartbreak and love and tears and pride and joy and soul-crushing moments and anger and rage, and how many other emotions can I think of? It hits every single mark, and it hits it beautifully. And Beartown is a story about this hockey team, and they are everything to this tiny town. And when one of the hockey players is accused of sexually assaulting a girl, the entire town literally is divided over what happened and who they support and who they believe, and how it impacts everyone in this town, because it literally impacts everyone in this town. I can't recommend this book enough. It's absolutely beautiful. He does an outstanding job in the sequel of continuing the story of this town, and I will recommend these to everyone I've ever met, ever, for the rest of my days. But beautifully written and perfect winter books. So another book that is on my TBR from an author I have never read before, and there's actually a couple of these too, is Stephen King's Misery. So I finally picked up a Stephen King book, and I haven't read it yet because I was trying to save it for winter time. So here we are, it's officially winter, and I want to read this book. And this is about the best-selling author Paul Sheldon, who basically is kidnapped by his biggest fan, who is Crazy Cakes. And her name is Annie, and she imprisons him in her isolated house. And nobody knows where he is. And I have not seen the movie. I know it's James Caan, and I knew this was gonna happen. I'm gonna blank on her name, but I can see her face. The movie had great reviews. I've heard great things about this book. I am dipping toes into horror. I don't know how horror this is. Like, obviously being kidnapped and I think he's basically tortured by her is horrifying. So there's this. I'm excited to read it. I know The Shining also takes place with a complete winter vibe. So that is the hotel in Colorado, I want to say. All work and no play make Jack a dull boy. I haven't seen that movie either. I have stayed pretty clear of Stephen King in my life. Not because I'm not a fan of his or an appreciation of his, but because I'm a scaredy cat. And I saw Pet Sematary, the original. We watched that movie at my friend's house and it scared me to death. But The Shining is another one. The family is a caretaker of an inn or a hotel in Colorado, and I'm pretty sure they get snowed in and then horror starts to happen. So that's another one if you are a Stephen King fan or want to be a Stephen King fan or want to give Stephen King a go. So Misery, The Shining, two options there. Another new to me author is Joe Nesbo, and the book is The Snowman. So I picked up this book because Abby from Crime by the Book, I want to say she said this is her most favorite book ever. And I'm a huge fan of Abby's. I've gotten so many great recommendations from her. So I picked this one up again, wanted to read it in the winter because Snowman. And this is a serial killer book. So this is actually part of a series. So it's Inspector Harry Hole, but she swears that you can read it no matter what. Like, you don't need to be reading the series to pick up this book in the middle. So whatever, I'm doing it. I believe her. She can tell me anything and I'll do it. So this is about a serial killer who kidnaps women all on the day of the first snow. So suffice to say, I have survived the first snow in New York of this year, and I'm still here. So that's good. So I'm glad I didn't read this before that. And I guess he leaves a snowman like on their front lawn is his signature. Like, what a creeper. What a total creeper. And so we've got a new woman disappearing and Harry is on the case. So it says the snow in the yard reflected enough light for him to make out the snowman down below. The pebble eyes were gleaming, and they were not staring into the house. They were looking up here. This sounds all shades of creepy, so I'm super excited. I have two books from another author that I'm a huge fan of. So one I've already read and one is on my TBR. So the first book, the one I read, is The Death of Mrs Westaway by Ruth Ware. And I loved this book. So I'm a huge Ruth Ware fan, and I will say, I've talked about this before, I adore all of her books except The Woman in Cabin 10. That's the only one I didn't like. Started off great, took a turn, not for me. She is such a great writer, I think. I love her stories, I love her characters. There is an element of slow burn, I would say, to this one, and it's definitely, supposedly, has Rebecca vibes, which I haven't read yet, but it's on the list. But this one is about kind of a fake tarot reader, Hal. So Hal is basically kind of down on her luck, a little bit alone in the world, and she can read people, and she kind of has this tarot business that she's got cooking. But she winds up getting this letter in the mail saying that her grandmother has left her this huge inheritance after she died. But the kicker is Hal knows that Mrs. Westaway is not her grandmother, but she is so desperate that she responds to the letter and pretends that she's the granddaughter so that she can get the money. And the whole family, who actually are Mrs. Westaway's relatives, are not completely jazzed about it. So we get kind of two timelines. We get some letters from the past. We get some things happening in the present day. And one of the things that I liked about this book, so I actually had an opportunity to see Ruth Ware speak about this book when it came out. And oh, how I long for the days where I'll be able to go to a bookstore and see an author talk about a book again. But in her previous books, she said, you know, she had characters who were sort of put into circumstances, not against their will per se, but not by choice. So the difference in this book is Hal has a choice. So she is presented with this letter that she is inheriting this money. She knows she is not the rightful recipient of the letter, but she goes anyway. And this is what happens with the person who makes the choice to put themselves in the situation. So I loved it. Snow plays a huge factor. Well, it doesn't play a huge factor. Snow plays a factor in this. It's snowy, it's cold, it's all those creepy house vibes to all of it, but loved it. And then on my list that I'm going to read this winter is her latest book, One by One, which is the very Agatha Christie and Then There Were None vibes. So this is about a work trip on the French Alps, which never in my life is that going to be my work trip. But there is a company outing, they wind up going. There is an avalanche or a blizzard or something that basically traps them all there, and at least one person dies, and they have to figure out who done it. So I am disappointed to say that when I talked about this in my new releases that I was excited about, somebody had mentioned that it wasn't getting good reviews. I haven't read any reviews on it. I'm going to read it regardless because she's an auto-buy author for me, but like that bums me out a little bit, but it's also not going to change my desire to read it. So we'll see what happens, and when I do read it, I of course will let you guys know what I think, but clear snow vibes. Weather is a factor in this one. So the next book is another one that has been unfortunately collecting dust on my shelf because I'm bad at my hobby of reading. And it's Pretty Things by Janelle Brown. And I don't even remember where I heard about this book. So this came out this year. It was on somebody's list. It caught my attention. I had to have it. And part of it takes place in Tahoe, so there's some snow to it. But it is two wildly different women, one a grifter, the other an heiress, are brought together by the scam of a lifetime. So it says it's a page turner. We have Nina, we have Vanessa, we have somebody's boyfriend, and it says their paths collide here on the cold shores of Lake Tahoe, where their intertwined lives give way to a winter of aspiration and desire, duplicity and revenge. So I know I need to know. I don't want to read too much more about it, but sounds twisty. It says it's a great thriller. There's huge plugs on the back from Harlan Coben, from Attica Locke, from Jessica Knoll, from Angie Kim, from Jean Kwok. So yes, please, yes, please, yes, please, and Tahoe winter cold vibes. The next book is The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, and I have not read Jennifer McMahon yet, but I do have The Night Sister back on my shelf. But this one is, I think all of her books maybe have like a ghost vibe to it, but this takes place in two timelines. This is also in Vermont, so automatically I'm like getting chills. And there are strange disappearances that are happening at this farmhouse, apparently. So there's a disappearance in 1908, and then we have somebody in the present day where the family who lives there, the mother disappears. And our main character, Ruthie, winds up finding the diary of the woman who disappeared in 1908. And it's kind of like Ruthie gets sucked into the historical mystery, and she discovers that she's not the only person looking for someone that they've lost, but she may be the only one who can stop history from repeating itself. So I don't know too much about this book, but it sounds really good and creepy. So again, I'm trying to expand my horizon with some ghost and horror-y type of things, and I've heard some great things about Jennifer McMahon, so this is on the list. Now, I know I missed like a bajillion books that have snowy vibes to them, so feel free to list some more books down below that you guys have read or recommend or have heard about with all the snowy feels. And I will let you guys know what I think of the books that I talked about today when I do read them, and I will see you guys in another video really soon. So thanks for hanging out today. Stay warm, everybody. Bye.